Welcome to this week's conversation with our professional partners. And this week we have attorney Jamal James, and he's going to help us with a question that I think that you guys will really appreciate the answer to. And so the question that came in was, what are the options if either you can go from whether it's a buyer or a seller, or you can just kind of address both of them if you like, if they're not able to attend the closing?
Gotcha. That's a good question.
Because if they can't come, they're like, I can't come, so what am I going to do?
Exactly. All right, so two sides. I guess I'll start with the seller side first for you sellers out there. So typically, this is something that we've done common after post-COVID or during COVID. For sellers, there's only a few documents that you have to physically sign. The deed, there's a lien waiver, and a few tax documents. So typically, if you can't come to closing, what we'll draft all those documents and then we'll send it to the seller. And then the seller can, two options there. The seller can sign those documents with a notary outside of our law firm and then overnight those documents back, or they can have those documents signed and maybe the realtor, if y'all have time to drop them off, or someone else, they can have those documents dropped off. And then as for the numbers, which are the settlement statements, those are DocuSign typically. This is something else that's been really popular after COVID. It's really convenient for all clients. So those are DocuSign. And that handles the documents for the seller. The buyer side, it's a little different because there's a lot more documents that have to be signed and notarized. So there's two options. One, we use mobile signing companies, and what those companies do, we basically have the closing package. We'll send it to the notary or the signing agent, and then that person will sit down and do the closing literally with you, the buyer, where your address is located, or if you want to meet in a public place that has some privacy as well. But there's a signing agent that can sign the documents for you or sign the documents with you. Then we also have another option, and this kind of depends on the market or what we have going on. But typically, if the closing's close or if you're not too far away, sometimes as attorneys, depending on our schedule, we can come out as well and do the closing at a location that's convenient for buyers also. So it really just depends on what works. If a client, and this is another crazy part of this, I've had clients Puerto Rico that we've used a signing service for, very rural areas too. So I mean, it really does work that way pretty well also. But again, if it's local and it's not too far for us, if there's any limitations on getting into the office, then we'll go out too if time permits.
Okay. Actually, I think it was right when COVID first hit, I had a closing that was scheduled already. And one of the attorneys from your office actually came out and did the closing. We did it in a parking lot.
Yeah. It was a lot of that.
It was, that was just so interesting to me. But I was really appreciative because my sellers were concerned because they didn't want to be in a small office with someone that they really didn't know.
Definitely.
And the attorney was saying, well, I'll come out and I'll meet. And then that way everybody can stay in their car. And he came to each car separately and took care of the paperwork being signed. So guys, there are options if you can't make it into the attorney's office for closing, whether you're a buyer or for a seller. And that brings back another question real quick before we go. Who actually schedules the notary to go out? If there's if it's somewhere, like you said, Puerto Rico or whatever, do you schedule it or does this?
Yeah, we schedule it. And that's good that you brought that up because the main thing is to make sure we don't have any delays in closing. For whatever reason, that you can't come to closing, which is not an issue. It's best to let your realtor know as soon as possible. So that way we can get that notary set up to come meet you. And there's no delays because it does take a little time to get them scheduled. And another thing too, I didn't mention another option, which is less common, but there's also the power of attorney option. So this works really well for people that are married or if you have someone that you trust. What you can basically do is have, I'll use a spouse as an example. If your spouse can't make it to closing, but you can, what you'll do is have a power of attorney set up, which will allow your spouse to sign the closing documents for you. So if one person can't make it, you can still come to closing. You can still sign on behalf of your spouse. And I always say this during closing, it's not one of those crazy power of attorneys where you're like, signing your rights or anything like that. It's literally just for this one transaction. So that's another option too. If you didn't want to meet with a signing agent, you want to make sure you can come into the office, we handle that as well. So a lot of different options, but the number one thing is just to let us know in advance to make sure we don't have any delays.
Another one you guys do is a person, let's say for instance, a seller can't come on today, can't come today on Thursday,
right?
But they can come Monday beforehand. They can come in beforehand, right? They can come in advance of closing.
Yeah, that's true too. And that's really important also because I know a lot of times, you don't close the house every single day, but we do a lot of these. But it's a lot more flexible than you would think, So if that is the case, the closing's on Thursday, like you said, but you can't make that, again, just let us know and we'll squeeze you in. Because, typically with the seller, you're not in the office very long to do that part, maybe 15 to 30 minutes max. So yeah, if the seller can't make it on closing day, let us know. Like you said, it could be a week before, a couple of hours before, but it's very flexible too.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys. You're always so helpful for our audience as well as my buyers and sellers that I bring.
For sure.
And we really do appreciate it. But until next time, we have another question for you.
Gotcha.
All right. Talk to you then. All right, guys. I hope you got some meat from this conversation with Jamal. And if you need some assistance, look for their contact information in the comments area.